Jelaina's song. Dr. Gabriel Reese pretended not to see the little girl smushing her face against the glass door of his laboratory. The door stayed locked whether he was inside or not. He just couldn't risk his Jelaina's safety. She asked to help every day, without fail. When Dr. Reese removed himself from his work to have lunch, Jelaina tried her luck yet again. "Can I help today?" she said whilst the two shared a plate of mini sandwiches. Dr. Reese shook his head. "No, not until you're as tall as me." "I'll never be that tall." Jelaina was probably right. Unless a growth spurt gifted her a whole yard of height, she would always have to look up to her father. On Jelaina's ninth birthday, she blew out the candles on her cake. Dr. Reese already knew what she'd wished for. After the party was over, it was time to give Jelaina her heart's desire. He told her to close her eyes and hold out her hands. Reese placed the jewelry box in Jelaina's tiny hands. "You can open your eyes now," he said. Jelaina opened her eyes and the jewelry box. Inside, a pair of diamond earrings sparkled in the light. Reese smiled wide, fully satisfied that he'd gotten her the perfect gift. After all, don't all girls want diamonds? Jelaina faked excitement, complete with jumping and squealing. Dr. Reese was so proud of himself. Too proud. The next day, he was less sure. Jelaina didn't visit his lab and press her face into the glass. She didn't come the day after that either. For weeks and then months, Jelaina had lost interest. One day, Dr. Reese found Jelaina in her room, sitting on the floor, reading a book and humming her song. Not just her song, but their song. The song that his late wife Anya used to sing to their baby. Reese didn't remember the words as he refused to listen to any audio of Anya singing. Jelaina never sang it out loud. She would only hum. Dr. Reese had an announcement to make. "Come with me," he said. "I want to show you something." Jelaina left her book open and followed Reese to his laboratory. He unlocked the door and held it open for her. The sudden look on Jelaina's face was replaced by shock. "Welcome to my world," Reese said. "Make yourself at home. Just don't touch anything." Dr. Reese had a collection of vials at his workstation. They were all filled with an off-white serum. Jelaina pointed at the vials. "What do those do?" Dr. Reese took one vial and held it close to his face. "It's a budding initiator. It mimics the reproduction process of yeast, but at an accelerated rate." Dr. Reese turned his back to Jelaina. He was so infatuated with his odd creation that he'd already forgotten his reasons for inviting her in. He unscrewed the cap and smelled the serum as if it were aged French wine. Jelaina hadn't been stationary. She crept towards him one silent step at a time. "This is so important," Dr. Reese whispered. "This could, in theory, be used to clone food." Jelaina reached out with both hands. She shoved her dad in the back and said, "Can you make people?" Dr. Reese was so startled that he whirled around and dropped the open vial on Jelaina's head. Jelaina laughed, not yet realizing the horror that was to come. "Not good, not good, very bad," Dr. Reese screamed. He picked Jelaina up and ran from the laboratory. Jelaina rubbed the top of her head and poked an eye that was not hers. "What is that?" she said, while feeling around the face that was growing out of the top of her skull. When her little fingers found the nose and lips, she lost all composure. Jelaina screamed and cried, "Daddy, there's a face on my head! There's a face!" Dr. Reese took Jelaina outside and put her in his car. He sat in the driver's seat with panic mode activated. What do I do? What do I do? What have I done? Hospital? No, they'll ask too many questions. Work? Yes. Yes! Jelaina shrieked as the face became a whole head. Dr. Reese sped off, intending to go to his job at the local university. He watched in the rearview mirror as a fully formed clone of Jelaina pulled itself away from the original. Remain calm, sweetie, he said. Try not to panic. We're going to see my colleagues. They can help us. Jelena looked at her arms. They had turned lumpy. Out of her right arm, another right arm grew and waved around while her completed clone watched with lifeless eyes. Out jumped another clone. When they reached the school entrance, 3 copies of Jelena were piled up in the seat with her. Jelena could take no more. As soon as Dr. Reese parked his car, Jelena jumped out and ran. Dr. Reese considered running after her, but didn't want to leave the buds unattended. They didn't speak or even move. As full of life as Jelena was, they had inherited none of her personality. Dr. Reese locked his doors and ran across the lawn of the science building. He found Dr. Roe Randall in her office. Reese burst in without bothering to knock. Excuse you, Dr. Randall said. Don't you know how to knock? Yes, Reese said and knocked on her desk thrice. Please help me. Help me, help me, help me. Randall waited for an explanation, but Reese was too hysterical to give one that made sense. Yeast. The budding, Reese sputtered. Jelena's budding. I have 3 of them in my car. She ran and now she's lost, but the buds aren't lost. I have them. Dr. Randall followed Dr. Reese to his car without masking her annoyance and frustration. She looked at his back seat and regretted ever meeting Gabriel Reese. What did you do? Dr. Randall demanded. What have you done? Dr. Reese shrugged. Was an accident. I didn't mean to. From the woods nearby, a small army of Jelaina buds emerged. Students and staff who saw pointed and whispered among themselves. Dr. Randall headed off to the trees. She thought maybe Jelaina was hiding there, ashamed and terrified. Her father had turned her into an experiment by accident, and neither doctor knew how to help. Randall walked into the woods and into a crowd of Jelaina duplicates. There were too many to count, and knowing a number would do nothing to stop that number from growing. Dr. Reese was right behind her, rambling on about how his reputation would be ruined and how much jail time he may face. Shut up, Gabriel, Dr. Randall said. Grab the real Jelaina so we can get her to the lab. Dr. Reese looked around. Every Jelaina looked like the real one. The doctors waded through the horde of blank-faced clones. Dr. Randall turned around and stomped on Reese's foot. You really don't know your own daughter? Come on, do better. Dr. Reese began humming. He limped around the Jelainas humming her song. There was no response. At first. Reese kept walking and humming, until he found her sitting under a tree. The real Jelaina was crying and rocking herself and humming her song. Dr. Reese picked her up. He carried her all the way to the school laboratory and waited for Dr. Randall. Another bud was in the process of sprouting from Jelena's chest when Randall joined them. It mimics yeast, Dr. Randall said. A fungus. What's antifungal? Jelaina raised her hand like a model pupil. Bleach? Dr. Randall gave her a small applause. Bleach. Dr. Reese bumbled around the lab in search of the possible solution. He located a small bottle and handed it to Dr. Randall. Ro Randall washed her hands, put on a pair of rubber gloves, and snatched the bleach bottle from Reese. She sprayed a minimal amount on the face growing from Jelena's chest. The face disappeared. It worked, Dr. Reese yelled and did a victory dance. Shut up, Gabriel, Dr. Randall said again. We have to dip her in bleach. That's nothing to dance about. Reese stood still and slumped his shoulders. Right. Dr. Randall caressed Jelaina's cheeks. You'll be fine. What about the other me's? Jelaina said. Will you bleach them too? You should use a water gun. And that's just what Randall did. With Jelaina safely in the lab, she procured a high-capacity water gun and went to work on the clones. All were doused and dissolved, beginning with the three in Reese's car. Her work was not done without an audience, as several people had noticed the clones and couldn't resist the urge to capture video. Dr. Reese waited outside the shower area for Jelaina to wash the bleach solution off of herself. He heard her humming and joined in. Did you enjoy this story? Jelena's song? I hope so. There are more to come.